I would say the number one is that, hey, I can just take an investment, put it in a structure overseas, and now I don't owe any taxes on it. Whoa, that is not the case at all. I don't know where you guys came up with this type of stuff. There are filing requirements, there are disclosures. You have to be very transparent with your tax home country. We follow all of the laws and the regulations of not just the countries we're investing in, but also our home country. If you're still a tax resident back home, you're going to owe taxes there on your worldwide income, no matter what.
Yeah.
If you're a Canadian, you still, and you're living in Canada, you owe taxes. If you're US, doesn't matter where you live. Actually, taxes, US taxes on citizenship, not just on tax residency.
Friends, welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Mikkel Thorup with us today. He is the founder and CEO of Expat Money, a private consulting firm established in 2017, and the host of the popular Expat Money Show podcast. He's recognized as one of the world's leading expat consultants. He helps high net worth individuals legally reduce taxes, secure second residences and citizenships, and build global investment portfolios in real estate, agriculture, and other hard assets. He's the best-selling author of Expat Secrets and Expats Guide on Moving to Mexico. He has lived in traveled to over 110 countries, but lived in 9, and he advises clients worldwide. Thanks for being here with us today.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks very much for having me on, Caleb. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation. And we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is real estate and specifically commercial real estate. So I think it's just awesome work that you're doing, and just so happy to see someone focused on such an important aspect of tangible assets.
Thank you so much. Yeah, what you do is very unique, and this is a new conversation for me, so I'm super curious to see where the conversation goes. So maybe give us a little bit of background on yourself personally and professionally, and what was your path to get to what you're doing today?
So for my story, I have to go quite far back in time, but I think it will be relevant, and I'll try to make it as concise as possible. But Caleb, when I was a child, I was actually diagnosed with a learning disability. And what happened was one day the teacher pulled me out of class and they sat me down in a little room, and the staff was there, resource teacher and the principal and vice principal, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, Mikel, something doesn't work quite right in your brain. And what we want to do, send you to special school for special boys. And that's what they did every day for 3 years. I took a little white bus across town, and I went to this quote unquote special school. Now, only problem was it was actually a regular school with a special class. So you can probably imagine what happened.
Yeah.
I got in tons of fights, and I got picked on, and I got bullied, and it was all around a horrible experience. Now, this is no woe is me, poor Mikel, victim type of story. Certainly not. I got hit, and I hit back twice as hard if possible. I would never claim otherwise. But after 3 years, I finally got able to go back to my neighborhood school, and I was so excited. But once again, you can probably imagine what happened. Everybody started gossiping and whispering, and I remember Mikel, he went to some retard school. And it was like, oh, thanks, guys. Very, you know how children are, very politically correct, very sensitive, just left a very bad taste in my mouth for public education, for state-run education. Yeah. So I stopped going. And when I stopped going, Caleb, I started failing. And then I basically got held back. And long story short, I stopped going to school at 12 years old, and I officially dropped out at 15. Wow. And not shortly after that, I started traveling internationally. And when I moved overseas and started meeting all these amazing people and seeing how they were learning and doing things completely different than I had ever seen in Southwestern Ontario, where I grew up, I felt like I found my people. Them's my peeps.
Yeah.
And fast forward to today, and I've been traveling for 25 years straight.
Wow.
As you said in the intro, I've traveled to well over 100 countries. I've lived in 9. I actually own real estate in 10 different countries. Wow. And I've built my entire life international. Now, quick side note, this learning disability that was such a horrible thing in the 1980s to pull me out of school was dyslexia, which kind of we know right now is not a big deal and actually very common, and many people have it. And some of the most intelligent and successful human beings on planet Earth are also dyslexic. So it's not really a big deal. But back 1980s, it was a criminal offense. But I built my entire life and portfolio and investments and everything overseas. Now, that kind of doesn't answer the question on how did I get into real estate and how did I get into commercial real estate. For that, you have to understand my parents. I was very fortunate actually because my parents did fix and flips when I was very young. And then they were having so much luck with that my mother actually decided to be a real estate agent and then a
Mm.
real estate broker. So for 12 years growing up, every weekend, I
Yeah.
was out looking at real estate and things like
Yeah.
this. Now that was residential. I mean, it is different, but at least
Sure.
it was the background and seeing how a lot of these types of things put together. And I got into residential real estate many years ago on a personal and a business level, but over the last couple of years I've moved more into commercial real estate,
Mm.
specifically like office spaces and things like that, which is
Yeah.
maybe not a great investment if you're in New York or in
Right.
some
Yeah.
big US cities, but overseas it's actually really in
Mm.
need, and a couple of other aspects of commercial real estate. So I'll pause there, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a background and we can take it
Yeah.
in any direction you
No,
like.
absolutely. I love hearing your story and how you've overcome so much and using your life experience. I grew up part of my life in India. We traveled a lot within the US and moved around, but I think it gives you that ability to have flexibility and you're able to conform and absorb things in a very different way than a lot of people. So, in a way, somewhat it definitely has been an advantage for you. And you talk about living in 9 different countries. I'm just curious, what was your top two places that you lived?
I've been living the last 6 years in Panama City, Panama, which I'm very much a fan of. I really like life down here. It's a very family first culture. I've made some amazing friends here. It's so well connected. You've got the Atlantic, the Caribbean on one side, and you have
Mm.
Pacific on the other. We're eating organic food every day. The
Yeah.
cost of living is very low. The quality of living is very high. It's extremely safe. They have good medical facilities here. It's just a fantastic place on all levels. So I'm very much a fan of this. And then
Yeah.
previous to this, I actually lived in the Middle East for almost a decade. I was
Okay.
between Abu Dhabi and Dubai for almost a decade. And I like it for completely, well, somewhat similar reasons, but also completely different reasons
Yeah.
too. It was so culturally different and it was just so interesting to be there. And then being able to take short flights to
Yeah.
anywhere in the world, you're literally in the center of the planet.
Yeah.
Where growing up close to Toronto, you're not at the center of the planet. You're at the edge of the planet.
Right.
Nothing is around you. So I really, and this is, call it the last 15 years of my life have been between these two countries.
Yeah.
So I'm very much a fan of both of them.
That's awesome.
But I think the future is definitely Latin America, especially if people are interested in freedom and living in a place more with more personal responsibility and more family values, traditional values, and things
Yeah.
like that.
Awesome. I used to run a nonprofit, so I've been to Panama and Panama City several times, as well as the Middle East. I loved Jordan, spent a little bit of time in Dubai as well. But I think that taste for adventure, I'm sure somehow translates into how you structure deals, how you look for properties. One thing that you had mentioned was you started making that move from residential to commercial. What was the reason behind that? And what were some of the signs that you saw that started pointing you that direction?
So this is a good question. When I'm looking at real estate, I'm not looking at a individual deal in a silo. Really, what I'm looking at is how does it add to my existing
Mm.
portfolio? And I have a very nice, call it mid 8 figure type of personal portfolio that I've built up over the years.
Yeah.
And I really started to see that I was very heavily weighted in a lot of short-term rentals, beachfront,
Mm.
things that can be affected by closure of borders or tourism
Mm.
changes or administrative things with Airbnb no longer being popular and stuff like that,
Yeah.
going out of favor with municipalities. And I started wanting to have something that had a longer time horizon. Now, sometimes I might be giving up the potential of returns, but in response to that, I actually get a lot of stability to the portfolio. And I'm a father of four,
Mm.
and I have a wife who I love and adore, and she's a stay-at-home mom. And I wanted something that is really going to be there for them, which is not dynamic pricing models and different
Right.
bookings and technology focused. It's like with a lot of the commercial with restaurants, if you're renting out to a restaurant, they're not going to be changing their they're going to not going to be changing their location 12 months from now. You might get that in a with a single family home or something like that where they'll be flipping around, or student housing or something can be
Mhm.
shorter. But with a lot of these people, it's these are 5 year leases or
Yeah.
10-year leases or something
Yeah.
like that. I'm like, I really like that in the portfolio. So I think of these as a lot of bedrock places in the portfolio.
Yeah.
And that just has me sleeping a lot better at night, let's say.
Yeah. So one of the things that you do is you help other people do what you've done. And one of the ways you put it is that you're building an offshore plan B. So maybe talk to me a little bit about that and why should every investor consider an offshore strategy?
So this is an interesting one. I'm not here to talk politics or left, right, or any of these types of things, but I think we can all agree that the world is a pretty crazy place at the moment. We don't really know what's going to happen or what's around the corner. But I do think that we have a responsibility to protect our families and our wealth. And I think that diversification is extremely important. Now, I am very much for tangible assets. I like personal responsibility. I want to know what I have and I want to
Yeah.
own it. But I
Yeah.
want to really own it, not
Yeah.
some stock portfolio. I have no idea in these publicly traded companies what's on the balance sheet or what kind of debts they have or what their governance is like. Like
Yeah.
it's just too complicated right now.
Yeah.
But a piece of real estate, like going back to my example, if I'm renting out a property to a restaurant, I can be pretty sure I know they're going to pay and they're going to pay on time and what is there. And by the way, I own these properties debt free. I'm not taking out expensive mortgages or
Mm,
anything like that. I don't do expensive leverage. I try to hold them in the appropriate structure. I'm all tax optimized. I work with my lawyers and everything like that to make
mm.
sure all my filing is correct and that we're good on all of these types of fronts. But I really own this. This is a titled property. It's a
Right.
freehold property, not a leasehold.
Yep.
And then when you add to that we're doing it overseas, so the costs are drastically less. You don't need that expensive mortgage. Your price per square meter is drastically less in Panama City or in Colombia or somewhere else than it would be in New York or Los Angeles or Toronto.
Sure.
It allows you to still get great returns because obviously when you're coming in with a strong currency into a weaker currency, there is this geo arbitrage,
Mm.
and you don't have to juice the returns with taking out debt, but you're not taking on that downside risk as well, where you can become underwater on a property, something like that. So to
Right.
parrot what I was saying before, I like the stability and I sleep well at night with this type of build out, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we've got an investor listening and or someone looking to become an investor, maybe they haven't invested here in the West, in North America, what are some pieces of advice that you'd give for them? What are some key things that you look for that they should also learn about and execute?
So when I'm looking at a deal, I have probably a 40-point checklist, really what I'm looking for in a deal. Now, for every 20 deals that I see that come across my desk, I probably say no to 19 of them. And I think that this is very important. People are always asking me, like, where do you start with all of this? I am looking at the 40,000-foot view. I'm out looking at the macroeconomics of the country, of the region, of the GDP, of the food, the water, the energy, the resiliency of the country. I follow the politics, both the local and the geopolitics, very closely
Yep.
of the areas of all of these types of places. And I'm looking for overall trends. Now, after that, you might be thinking, let's look at the deal next and let's look at the spreadsheets and let's look at the numbers. Actually, it's not that way for me at
Mm,
all. It's really about the partners.
mm.
If I find a good law office or a family
Yeah.
office or a developer or someone that I can work with who is extremely trustworthy and extremely honest and ethical, that even when things are really, really difficult, you can count on them to do the right thing.
Yeah.
That for
Yeah.
me is the important piece.
Yeah.
And it's like everything in between those two factors of being very careful on the large economic and
Mm.
political and geopolitical things, and then finding the right partner to work with,
Yeah.
that everything in between kind of sorts itself out. If I can be careful about those two types of things, then it's good. If I focus too much on the numbers and everything like that, and I turn an eye away from the partners or the region, that's the only place that I really ever see any types of problems. And I've
Yeah.
done a lot of deals, a lot of club deals, a lot of private off-market type of projects, and we're doing really well with this stuff.
That's
So I
awesome.
guess
Well,
to answer your question, I would look at these two types of things
yep.
first and foremost and
Yep.
worry about the spreadsheets maybe a little bit later on.
No, I love that. And that's such the vibe of the show because that's something that we talk about in commercial real estate. As brokers, we don't necessarily have the best reputation to focus on having the right people around us. It's about how do we get the deal pushed across the finish line and get a check at the end, right? It's really more about having the right people around you. And my listeners have heard this a lot of times. All we've got is our time, our reputation, and our expertise. And those are the three things that we have to guard. So, what are some common misconceptions about offshore investments?
I would say the number one is that, hey, I can just take an investment, put it in a structure overseas, and now I don't owe any taxes on it. Whoa, that is not the case at all. I don't know where you guys came up with this type of stuff. There are filing requirements, there are disclosures. You have to be very transparent with your tax home country. We follow all of the laws and the regulations of not just the countries we're investing in, but also our home country. If you're still a tax resident back home, you're going to owe taxes there on your worldwide income, no matter what.
Yeah.
If you're a Canadian, you still, and you're living in Canada, you owe taxes. If you're US, doesn't matter where you live. Actually, taxes, US taxes on citizenship, not just on tax residency. Now, there are strategies that we can do to legally reduce this, but I get this kind of thing all the time. And I'm like always very transparent about,
Right.
no, you have a legal requirement. Actually, I even have a friend of mine, a colleague of mine who's coming this weekend to visit me, and he's a CPA. And all he does is just file taxes for foreigners
Yep.
who own assets or live abroad. And all day long, we're working together on these types of things. And he's going to be spending the next few days with me in Panama. And we have to stay compliant with all of this. So if you
Yeah.
hear anything else contrary to this on the internet, you know, you send them my way and I will straighten them out, because the whole point is to have more freedom in our lives. And you start breaking the law, and trust me, you're not going to have more freedom. You're going to have a lot less freedom. And I don't want
Yeah.
anyone to end up in a little orange jumpsuit.
Absolutely. So one of the questions I have is like, how do you balance global opportunities with local commitment? And what do you mean by local commitments?
Okay, so I think that the way that this was taken is we have local tax obligations because we're investing in that country. Then we're going to
Yeah,
have tax obligations of the country that we're going to structure the asset in.
got
So
it.
let's take an example. Let's say that you are an American citizen and you're going to be investing in Panamanian real estate, but you're going to hold it in I don't know, a BVI company or something like that. There's three different parties here that there could be filing requirements for. So we need to make sure that we're doing that on every level. Now, I do have a very international view on these things. So just
Hmm.
because we're owning assets in one country doesn't mean that you should be using that same country to structure the deal.
Yeah,
If you have partners, maybe it's not advantageous to either one of you to have it structured there. And we can usually do some type of foreign ownership of assets with it. Now, we syndicate a lot of deals. We have club deals, we have family office types of projects and things like that. So there can be a lot of different parties that we're moving into it.
yeah,
And earlier you mentioned the offshore and like a couple of buckets that I work in. One of them is immigration. With a lot of these investments, if I can secure you a second residency or a passport on it, does that help your family? Does it hinder your family?
right.
What are the requirements for that? What are the filing? What are the time obligations that you need to
Yeah,
spend in these countries? There's a lot of moving pieces with this, which I guess is why my services are very popular as a consultant, because it's difficult to keep it all straight and make sure you don't run afoul.
yeah. And you touched on some of the challenges of relocating abroad, but what are some of the other things that are some of the other challenges that an investor should be thinking about before they make these moves? Obviously, they need someone like you to be on their team, right? So they've got that safety net and the expert that's helping with it. But what are some of the things that are challenges that are faced when someone's looking to move abroad?
Absolutely. Let me first say that my work is not dependent on the client physically leaving the country. So I
Sure.
would say probably about 50% of my clients are only doing a plan B. So this means moving a bit of money offshore, having a second property, whether that be residential or commercial, or building out a portfolio, some bank accounts, some
Mhm.
structures, things like that. And then, so let's say that's the first half. Okay. And the second half is they're doing all those things, but they are also physically relocating
Mhm.
themselves. Now, in the second group, physically relocating yourself, I think one of the biggest pieces is the community aspect of it.
Mhm.
We're going to try to pick a country that matches your value system. And once again, I'm not here to tell you guys what your value should be, but I do want to make sure that whatever is meaningful to you and your family, that we're going to find the right place for that. Because
Yeah.
193 countries in the world, there are many different ways to see the world, many
Yeah.
different perspectives. And it's not one is right and one is wrong. It's just what makes sense for you and your family. But then when you get there, integrating, learning the language, learning the culture, learning the food and the history and all these things. I'm very much for showing respect to the new host country
Yeah.
by abiding by their laws and learning the language and really incorporating yourself into it, opposed to moving to a new country and expecting them to change
Yes.
based on what you saw. And you've clearly traveled around the world and you've been to some interesting places. Everybody wants roughly the same thing. Like they want a roof over their head,
Yeah.
they want a full belly, they want to be loved, they want to protect their kids. Humans are inherently the same. Now, how
Yeah.
we come to those things is different perspectives, and what might be seen as rude in one culture is
Yeah.
perfectly acceptable in
Yeah.
another. My wife is from mainland China, okay? Talk about two totally culturally different places. She was born and raised in China, okay? My
Yeah.
kids are born all in 4 different countries. My kids speak 4 languages. They're very international. Having an international viewpoint and trying to pick the country and then pick the community and pick the people you're going to spend time with, I think that this is something that takes a bit of time to get right,
Yeah.
but is so rewarding when you're able to do it.
Yeah. One of the things that you talked about, the two different types of investors that you have, some that are moving, some that are not. So for the ones who are not, they're just doing their plan B. One of the things that comes to my mind, just practically being in commercial real estate, is how is that managed? I know, at least in our markets, there's a lot of property management companies, things like that. So that seems to me like that could be a challenge as well when identifying a property.
Absolutely. And as I had mentioned, I have that roughly 40-point checklist. One of them is property management
Mhm.
on site, because in reality, 100% of my investors, people that I work with, are absentee owners.
Mhm.
Nobody is there. No one wants to deal with toilets, tenants,
Yeah.
and termites. That's just not what it's about. It comes down to building out a portfolio, just like
Mhm.
you would build out a stock portfolio. Okay. A lot of the real estate that I have, I actually don't know how many bedrooms are there. If you said, "Hey, how many square footage is this one you have over here?"
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a line item on
Right.
a spreadsheet somewhere. But it's the same kind of thing. Like, I could turn around to a stock market investor and be like, "Okay, what's the PE ratio of that one over there? What was their earning report in last quarter? What is the COO's name and where did he go to school?" Like, you would have no idea about
Right.
those types of things. And people have no problem forking over hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars by the click of a button and just expect everything will be okay. I believe that we should know our portfolios and the structure of the deal, but at the same time, it's an investment. I don't really care which is it facing east or west? Is
Right.
it facing like what type of sun exposure does this have? I don't know, mate. It's a line item here. I trust the deal. I trust the team that I have in
Yeah.
place. And as I said before, I spent a lot of time looking at the politics and geopolitics in the area and the economics and the growth and the path of progress of this opportunity. And everything else, you got to have a bit of faith and let the thesis play out, but it just kind of works itself out.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the geopolitical picture. So, what are some of the things that you look for? Obviously, I would imagine some growth, the freedom. What are some other items that investors are looking at to make a decision?
I've had the opportunity here in Latin America to sit down with a lot of the politicians directly. For example, I had an opportunity to sit down with the president of Paraguay twice this year. I had a visit with him once in Panama because there was a private luncheon for a few people. Panama has just joined the Mercosur, which is basically like a little EU in South America. It's the first non South American country to join. So the
Okay.
president of Paraguay came to Panama and he wanted to meet some people from the private sector. I got an invitation to go and speak with him. And then a couple of months later, I had an opportunity so that was a very official meeting on the books. And then I had an opportunity to sit down for an unofficial meeting. And I sat down with him for about half an hour and we were talking and I was consulting with him on immigration and what foreigners are looking for and foreign direct investment and what Americans and Canadians, what they would move overseas for. And we talk for about half an hour. And after probably about 20 minutes of him listening to me speak, he goes, "Stop, Mikel." And he reaches out and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, "I know what you're talking about. You're talking about freedom, Mikel." I was like,
Mm,
yes, Mr. President, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about freedom.
yeah,
And he's, don't worry about that. We have that here. And
that's
I was like,
awesome.
boom, this is amazing.
That's
And I doubled down and started investing. So I was already invested, but I just doubled down and
yeah.
invested so much heavier because you have this young administration. He's only a couple of years older than me, mid 40s, 47 or something like that. And very pro business, very open to foreign direct investment, and wants to deregulate and wants to bring in smart, successful entrepreneurs into the country and modernize things. And I was like, watch out. Like this country
Yeah,
is
that's a
on
what an
fire.
indicator. Yeah, absolutely. So you talk a little bit about future of citizenship by investment programs. I had never heard of this before. So can you maybe talk about that a little bit and where you see that going?
Yeah. So the idea of citizenship by investment is that you make a substantial contribution to the host country. And in return of that contribution, they make you a citizen. Now, these are official government run programs. Okay. So I'm not talking about something dodgy or sketchy or
Right.
bribing. You can go on the government website and you find all the information and the legal system. And sometimes, you actually not sometimes, every time you will find the exact law. It is right there. You can go and look it up. Now,
Yeah.
the popular countries for this are in the Caribbean. There's 5 countries. There's St. Kitts and Nevis, Grenada, St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda, and Dominica. These are the 5 countries in the Caribbean. Then there's a couple of other countries in the world. There's one in Vanuatu in the South Pacific. There's Turkey, there's Cambodia and Egypt and a few other countries. But let's call it all around about a dozen countries that will allow you to make a contribution
Yeah.
to the country. Usually it's in the form of a donation,
Hmm.
and that's used for public works and things like that. So they're able to generate non-tax dollars, non-tax
Hmm.
revenue that goes straight into infrastructure types of projects.
Yeah.
If you look at the Caribbean, there are a lot of hurricanes there and damage from these types
Yeah.
of things. So this is the money is used in most cases very well. In return, you become a citizen and you get a passport. Now, there are no laws that prevent an American or a Canadian or a Brit or most Western democracy countries from holding to citizenship. So it's a completely legal thing
Mm.
to do. Now, if you're Thai or you're Vietnamese or Indian or something like that's a different story. Okay,
Mhm.
let's stick to Western Europe and North Americans. You can absolutely have a second passport. Now, where it becomes extremely interesting from my point of view is when you can actually invest in the country, pick up some real estate, and
Mhm.
then on the back end of the real estate, get a second passport. So it's like
Mhm.
two birds in one stone.
Yeah.
So Turkey has an opportunity there. We've just got word that Argentina is going to be allowing a $500,000 investment and become a citizen of Argentina
Mhm.
under Javier Milei, who is the president, the libertarian president of Argentina, which he's doing some very interesting things there. It's that he actually follows me on X, on Twitter, and retweets a lot of my stuff. I'm very bullish on Argentina and what's happening in that country. We'll
Yeah.
see what the end result of the laws are because no one's been processed through this. But to be able to pick up, let's say, an Argentine passport, visit 170 some odd countries visa free, and maybe pick up a piece of real estate,
Yeah.
that would be pretty interesting. So,
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned kind of what the investment is for Argentina, because that was one of the questions that came to me is what kind of investment are we talking about? I'm sure it varies from country to country, but what's a ballpark range of what those investments look like?
yeah, so it really comes down to what you're going to get in return. So, as I mentioned before, Vanuatu, you're looking at around 91 countries visa free.
Mhm.
Visa free means that you can show up at their borders with
Mhm.
your passport and not have to request any special permission to be able
Right.
to enter. Okay. So, you just show up and you enter the country. Now, 91 countries is not very good. Okay. It's not a very
Yeah.
high number. And the countries that you would want to go to are not really the most popular countries. The most popular ones is the Schengen zone, so Western Europe, the UK, Singapore, Hong Kong. Obviously, Canada and the US are very interesting for people who have weaker passports. But the nice thing about this is it's only $135,000. Now, this is a donation to the country.
Yeah.
The next step up from that is the Caribbean. Caribbean is visa free travel to somewhere from around, call it around 140 to 157 countries, depending on which one.
Mhm.
Now, these kind of start at around the $220,000 mark up to maybe 250 or 260, depending on legal fees and a couple other variables, depending on the size of your family, things like that. But
Yeah.
let's call it $250,000 for ease of math. Those are good options. I did the St. Kitts and Nevis citizenship by investment, so I am a St. Kittian citizen and have a very strong passport on that. And I was very happy to make my donation to the government in return of that.
Yeah.
And then you have Turkey at the $400,000 mark, which is investment in real estate. Now it can be commercial, it can be residential, it can be land, it can be a couple of places put together. So that's a good option. We do help clients. I guess technically I help clients with all of these ones, but
Yeah.
definitely for your audience, that might be an interesting one. And you're looking at around 110 countries visa-free travel for that.
Yeah.
Now, as I said before, for Argentina, we don't know what's going to happen because it's completely brand new. But what I would like to see happen is it be a straight real estate investment in the same way that Turkey is, be a slightly more dollar amount, but instead of 110 countries, it'd be 170 countries,
Wow.
which would just completely shift the dynamic of the investment migration space.
Absolutely.
And I think would be very popular.
Yeah. Mikel, this has been super fascinating. It's opening my brain about thinking about differently for myself, for my clients. I know you've got a summit coming up, but where can people find you? And do you have any last words for our audience?
First, I want to say thanks very much for having me on. It's really a pleasure. And I love real estate and I love talking about real estate, any type of tangible assets. And as I said before, commercial real estate is very exciting for me. In the future of my portfolio, I've spent the last couple of years doing commercial real estate, but the more I do it, the more I enjoy it and the more I'm really leaning into it.
Yeah.
And I'm really getting away from what I started in, which was more of the short-term type of
Yeah.
stuff. Now, a lot of my work, I'll call it 99% of my work, you're going to find on expatmoney.com is our main website. We do 3 times a week blog articles about immigration, about investing overseas, about tax strategies, things like this. We host a weekly podcast, the Expat Money Show. So wherever you listen to podcasts today, you will find us there. We've been going for almost 10 years on that program. So lots of back content if you're curious about these things. And then we do monthly webinars and live streams. We do quarterly in-person trips. Actually, I just got back from another trip to Paraguay. We had about 45 investors on the trip with me. I spent 8 days with them, showing them the country. Very successful event. They really liked what they were seeing. We do a ton of work in Paraguay. We've also visited Northeast Brazil this year. We've done several trips to Panama. Next year, we're going to be doing a trip to Colombia, or at the end of this year, actually, I should say, should be doing a trip to Colombia. So a lot of in-person things, conferences.
Awesome.
But once again, everything is found at expatmoney.com.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we have all of that included in the show notes when it comes out. So if you guys are as curious as I am, start following what Mikel's doing and what their family and their team is doing. It could open up some new doors and new ways of thinking that you've never thought of before. So thanks again for being such an incredible guest and sharing all of your insights and expertise with us. And we hope to stay connected with you moving forward.
100%. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. If today's episode gave you valuable commercial real estate insights, subscribe, rate, and share it. Connect with me and the David Commercial Real Estate team through the show notes. Remember, real estate is more than buildings. It's about building community. See you next time.